Hello and welcome back to another episode in our draft series. We are now recapping the NFL draft as it happened last weekend. I have put out a couple episodes already talking about the couple quarterbacks that we did not discuss before the draft, so we did want to cover everybody that got picked. So go back and watch those if you haven't. Jon and I are going to do a couple recap episodes. The first today being on the NFL Draft Awards piece. So this is kind of just a way for us to have fun in this format to highlight some of the most significant things from mostly the first round, but we will have some full draft takeaways as well. And then we'll also have an episode talking about the quarterbacks and their landing spots sometime here soon as well. So today, again, it's going to be the format for the awards. A lot of this is, us just trying to, fit these into categories to discuss the biggest things from the draft. But Jon, I'll throw it over to you for our first award, which is most surprising pick.
Yeah, so for most surprising pick, I don't think there were a lot that were really surprising this year. I thought that for the most part, teams did a pretty good job of picking consensus players, who we were expecting to go first round. So I didn't really go like the direction of a team who picked a player I didn't like first round that I wasn't expecting to get first round. I just went the direction of a team picking a player I don't really think was a fit for them first round. So I said Emeka Ibuka. Again, I think he's going to be a good player, but it was kind of a weird pick for the Bucks because we know who their main receiving threats are going to be. So when you have Mike Evans, when you have Chris Godwin, those are going to be your dominant threats. So there's only so much upside Ibuka can bring in with this pick immediately. I think long term he could be a really good player still, but it was just kind of surprising because I think they had other needs that they could have filled. They were mocked Jihad Campbell a lot. Campbell potentially could have gone even higher than the Bucks pick, and I think that would have been a really good direction for them to go, as well as they could have gone several other directions with pass rush with linemen. So I think that Ibuka was really surprising to come off the board there, and that I don't think I'm the only one that would say that.
Yeah, you mentioned there being less surprises. I do think that definitely held true this draft, especially with how flat it was. It's just harder for guys to get picked far outside of a range that you expected because you could move 3 or 4 guys around in the order and nobody was going to be shocked by it. But on Ibuka specifically, I also agree. This was the one that I almost put before I ended up switching it to somebody else. It's very interesting to me. I think you can make an argument that, okay, Mike Evans is getting older. I think he only has 1 year left on his deal. And then Godwin's coming off multiple injuries. But the thing that surprised me the most is I thought they viewed Jalen McMillan as kind of that guy that if you have to have somebody play number 2 while one of Evans or Godwin is hurt, and then you also have K. Dot at tight end, who was a big time threat for them coming down at the end of the season when a lot of guys were banged up. I was surprised to see Ibuka taken, especially the way that they framed it, which I don't know if you listened to like their interviews or like the discussion around this. It seemed like they kind of framed the pick as like Ibuka was too high on our board for us to pass up, which I have like big questions about where Ibuka was on their board. Like, I don't know. I mean, this was a very flat draft. Like, people are going to have guys all over the place. But to me, that means like he must have been really high on their board.
Yeah, he must have been like a top 10 player.
Yeah,
for them
that's what I think. Which I am very surprised about. Like, I didn't think anybody would have Ibuka that high. I'm not surprised at all he went first round. I thought he would go first round, like just because of how sound a player he is. Like, coaches are gonna love that type of guy.
And he's apparently a really good locker room guy, so it makes tons of sense. Like, he works really hard. Everybody likes him.
Yeah. He blocks like he's probably he might be the best wide receiver blocker in the draft. Like all that stuff is there for him. But to me, like the guy in this draft that you make those kind of justifications for would be like if McMillan fell to 19. You're just like, okay, like we thought this guy was too good. I don't know if the guy that his upside is probably like a really good number 2. I don't know if that's the type of player that I'm like blowing everything up for, especially when, like you said, this team has real needs on defense, and they are in a quote unquote contention window right now. Like
Yeah.
these are the few years where I think they have the best chance to win in the near future. So I agree. I was very surprised by this just because I think it not that I'm completely against teams like thinking more long term. I just didn't expect the Bucks to do that here in the first round.
Yeah, and I think that they might have gone corner if Ibuka weren't there, because they came back and took two corners right after this. But um, even
Yeah.
if you're not going to do Campbell, like I would have understood that a lot more because they do have some needs in the secondary too.
And
But
Jade Barron goes right after. I think
yeah,
the Broncos, I think were also shocked that Barron fell to
yeah,
them, and it seemed like they were kind of in the same position where it was like, well, we were probably going to take a running back here or maybe a wide receiver, but
but
Barron is probably
Johnny
like
Barron's
I think he was
good.
top 10 on their board, and so they just said we're
Yeah,
just going with it. So yeah, I think if you flip those two picks around, like if Barron goes to the Bucks and Igbuka goes to the Broncos, I think nobody bats an eye. But
and I think they would have been great fits. I understand Barron to the Broncos, but I could understand them taking either of those players.
yeah,
So
yeah, very interesting. Igbuka was an interesting one. Yeah, I'm very sad as a McMillan dynasty owner. I like after
yeah,
taking him in the third round
tears
last year,
plummeted.
I felt like so good about that, and now we're in trouble. It looks like. All right, my most surprising pick of the first round was Tyler Booker
Yeah,
from Alabama with the Cowboys taking him. I don't. This is one of those where like when I saw the name, I was like, "There's no way." And then you think about it more, and you're like, "Okay, of course the Cowboys did this."
yeah.
But the shock of like this a lot. I didn't expect him to go first round, so I was very surprised when I saw him get picked this early. When you think about, I think the Cowboys just had him as one of their highest graded players, and they just said we don't feel very confident about a lot of other positions in this draft, so we're just going to take somebody we're confident can be a good player here. But I think this speaks to a larger trend that we're seeing, which is I think guys are getting taken earlier and earlier that might just be guards, which kind of
Yeah.
goes in line with guards are getting paid more now. So this may just kind of be like where we see things go, where as guards become more valuable against the salary cap, it makes more sense to spend high draft assets on them. But like the Patriots might have taken a guard at 4. We'll see. I still think that
Yeah.
Campbell will play tackle to start, but we'll see how that goes. Kelvin Banks, a lot of people think he is better at guard than at tackle, and he goes 9 to the Saints. And then Booker is like, there's no way he is
He is
not a guard. Like
definitely
he
a
is
guard.
absolutely a guard.
Well,
And there's
he played some left tackle for Alabama this year because of injuries. We had to reshuffle the line. He is absolutely a guard. He
yeah,
he couldn't really stick at tackle in college, so
no,
there's no
there's
question.
no way. And there's not really that many guards you look at that have gone this high. It's like Quentin Nelson, who's like a Hall of Famer, and then not really
Yeah,
anybody else in recent years. So I think when you look at the fit, like I can see why the Cowboys talked themselves into this. I think McMillan was going to be the pick, and when he was off the board, then you started to go somewhere else. I don't mind that they didn't take Matthew Golden at 12. I think that similarly would have been a reach to Booker, but I was very surprised to see them go guard as early as they did.
yeah. I really thought you could pencil in a receiver here. I thought they might go Golden, but if they did, I agree it would have been a little bit of a reach. Um, I think this was too early for Tyler Booker.
Yeah.
I think he's an all right prospect, but I think that he's definitely a second rounder. And I think he just has some physical limitations, some athleticism concerns that I would not want to take him this high. He is a huge guy, and he's an offensive lineman named Tyler. They've drafted three of them
Yeah.
in the first round recently, which is really funny. Um, so I don't I think it makes sense for the Cowboys that they did this. I don't know that I would have done this. I did text my friend who I mentioned him on the mock draft episode. Um, I texted him and asked him what he thought about it. He was really excited about the pick. Um, so I gave him a roll tide, of course,
Yeah.
for Tyler Booker this high. And I do think that they care a lot about building this offensive line. Those first round linemen have generally worked for them recently. So I do think you kind of have to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
that this pick will maybe work out for them. Um, So it will be interesting to follow that.
Yeah, the weird thing about the Cowboys is they actually are a really good drafting team. It's just the
Yeah,
other parts of roster management they're not as good at.
they're not good at extending their own players. They're not good at getting free agents in the
Yeah,
building.
but if
Yeah,
you look back, like they've done a good job of evaluating talent before. So yeah, like would not surprise me if Booker ends up being a very good player.
yeah,
But he also has like he might be the like best character eval of anybody in this draft.
yeah,
So I'm not surprised someone fell in love with him either, because I think like I'm sure he killed every meeting he was in at the combine, all
definitely.
those things. So like a team just saying like I don't really care, I just like this guy, that doesn't stun me. But yeah, that's my most surprising pick of the first round. I'll kick us off with now least surprising pick. So a lot of these awards we're kind of going to do one side than the other. The least surprising pick to me of the first round was Malachi Starks to the Ravens.
Yeah,
Partially because reporters basically came out the day before and said if Malachi Starks is there at 27, the Ravens are going to take. It was like I've never seen them like that type of report come out for the Ravens before. It was just like this is the guy. Like if he's there, they're absolutely taking him. This is the typical Ravens move, like just pick the good player that falls.
yeah,
Obviously, a lot of times it does have to do with positional value. Like you know, Linderbaum, great player. Most people aren't going to take a pure center early in the first round. Even Kyle Hamilton, the year they had the 14th pick, some concerns about the speed and the position he plays, ends up being the best safety in the league at this point. I don't think Starks is that level of player, but he's a guy that the Ravens clearly liked throughout the process, and they have really shored up their secondary now with adding him in that second safety spot after the Marcus Williams contract did not work out very well for them. So was not surprised at all to see Starks get taken there. This is the exact type of player that they love. I think they may have said he was like their top defensive player, which there's no way that that's actually true, but they seem to really like Starks and were very excited to have him on the board at 27. So that's my least surprising pick.
yeah. I think this one makes a lot of sense. We'll talk a little bit later about Howie and the Eagles. They kind of have the reputation of how do they keep getting away with it, but I think that DaCosta and the Ravens also have some of that reputation. I think they should have more of it because this was one of those like no brainers. Like Starks is a good player. He plays at a position that is not quite as valuable. I don't think he's as good as Hamilton because I don't think you can move him around as much. But I think that he complements Kyle Hamilton really
Yeah.
well because you can play him as a deep safety and move Hamilton around as much as you need to. I think Malachi Starks fits what they're doing. He's a good player. He good pedigree coming to Georgia. So yeah, when that one came up, and I actually didn't even see the report that they were planning on taking him. Um, so when that came up, I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense for
Yeah.
the Ravens. It's just classic Ravens move right there.
All right, your least surprising pick.
So mine was one of the chalkier picks of the first round. I went Tyler Warren to the Colts. So the Colts had an obvious tight end need, and this was something that months ago people were talking about was, well, Tyler Warren, if he's there at 14, is a natural fit for the Colts, gives them another target for their quarterback battle. Um, regardless of whether you think Tyler Warren's specific play style as a tight end fits what the Colts actually need in a tight end, because he is probably more of a move tight end. Um, I think that this was one that everybody was expecting, especially once you got to the 14th pick and he was still there. Everybody was expecting the Colts to kind of run that pick in.
Yeah, and with Loveland off the board, it made it
Yeah.
even less surprising because there was really no suspense on which tight end are they going to take? It was just okay. I guess it's Warren. I think it's an interesting fit. I honestly might have preferred Loveland with them. I think I would rather just get more security blankets around Anthony Richardson, but the Colts are just going all the way towards like we are just gonna be explosive. Like that is gonna be what we do, which I think is fun. I do think that they can probably find ways to get creative with him, especially in the play action. Using him in like heavy sets and leaking him out, those types of things. He will handle those well. But yeah, this is a guy that I think the the staff will have to create opportunities for him in order for him to have a great career in the NFL. Like he's not a guy you just like throw out wide and say go win.
Yeah.
And with a quarterback who's, not the most like his strength is not, managing all of those things at this point. I think this is a position that they had to fill, so it makes complete sense, but I could see a world where this doesn't go very well if it's real. I mean, like if Richardson's bad, like this pick will be a waste.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm worried about this one. I think I would have preferred, for Warren, I would have preferred him to be in Chicago. I think Loveland could have worked out either place because he is more of a traditional tight end, but I'm going more on the basis of I believe a little more in Caleb Williams than Anthony Richardson at this point. And I still have hope for Anthony Richardson because I think he was a good prospect coming out, and he's just had terrible injury luck so far in the league. Um, but Warren, I would have trusted more with Ben Johnson scheming things up for him. And I don't know that the Colts are necessarily going to do that. And absent doing that, and especially bringing in Anthony Richardson not working out, if both those things are true, then I think Warren could end up looking like a pretty ugly pick. And there could be some players down the board that would have fit what they needed a lot better.
Yeah, one of the things that I did think was interesting with this pick is like one of the comps that I had heard before the draft for Warren was Dallas Goedert, and you have Shane Steichen there coaching now for the Colts, so maybe he thinks Warren can be a similar type of player. Goddard obviously like eats a ton of targets in that Eagles offense, so if Steichen sees kind of a similar type of guy in Warren, like maybe it works out very well. But regardless of our opinion, like completely unsurprised that the Colts came away with a tight end at this pick.
Yeah. Well, and I'll throw in one more thing here just about like some of the tight end fits. I think I would have preferred the Colts to go a different direction and then come back for the tight end in the second round because there was kind of that tight end run with Mason Taylor and Terrence Ferguson and Elijah Arroyo in the second round. And I think that when you're looking at the way that Tyler Warren would help the Colts this year, a lot of those tight ends might be the same level of help to a regime and a quarterback that aren't sure if they're going to be there long term.
Yeah. The Colts picked at pick 45 in the second round. Terrence Ferguson goes pick 46. Elijah Arroyo goes pick 50. So they had their pick of those guys if they had waited. I
Mason
agree.
Taylor was 42, so they easily could have just, if they knew that he was going to go soon, moved up and jumped the Jets for him.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I think if I was the Colts, I also like Terrence Ferguson, which we'll get to in a little bit with the Rams here. But I do think I would have rather come away with Ferguson or Arroyo and potentially picked up, Jalen Walker goes right after Walter Nolan, Shamar. Like any of the D linemen, I think I probably would rather have come away with that if I'm the Colts.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, now we'll go to originally I had this as like best trade and then worst trade, but typically those are like the same thing, just with opposite teams. So we're kind of just going to have like best trade / worst trade as one award. So my pick for this one was the Falcons and Rams trade. The Falcons picked Jalen Walker at 15 and then traded back into the first round. They traded up to 26, and they sent the Rams their second round pick, which was at 46, and their 7th. And they also sent their first round next year. Atlanta did get back a 3rd, so it's not like they didn't just give up a first just to move up. Like they did pick up a 3rd back, but still like a big price to pay to come back and get another edge. My guess here on what happened is that they were going to take Pierce at 15 and were surprised that Walker was on the board. And so they end up taking Walker, and then they were like, well, like we really like Pierce too. Like, let's see what we can do to move back in. It's funny because if you had told me going into the draft that the Falcons come away with Walker and Pierce, I would have said like, oh, that's great. Like if they take Pierce in the second round, like if he falls to them there, That makes perfect sense. I did not think going into the draft that it would take an extra first to make that happen. And for a team that, like, they have moved the past couple years, like they are so confident they're going to be good, where like trading up, like they take Penix at 8 last year, and they're like, well, this is the last time we'll ever be picking close to the top 10, so we have to take a quarterback this year. And then now again they make another move where it's like, well, our first round pick, there's no way it's going to be bad, or I guess it would be a good pick. There's no way we're going to be bad next year. Our first round pick can't be that valuable, so we'll trade it and go get James Pierce, who has a bunch of character issues, is very undersized, and is not a super like strong explosive guy. He just wins on speed. I have a lot of concerns here just in general. Like I would not have loved if someone took Pierce in the first round, period. The fact that you give up a future first to make that move happen, I feel like this is just such an overpay, and it to me is not a good enough prospect where you can warrant that sort of price.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on pretty much all of it. I think that if they had just taken Pierce at 15, obviously they lose out on Jalen Walker. I wouldn't have hated it, but I wouldn't have liked it as much as, if they had just taken Jalen Walker and then moved on. They, to your point, Terry Fontenot and the rest of that front office has a very high opinion of themselves. They think they are going to be in the playoffs next year. We don't even know what Michael Penix is at this point. We have barely seen him. He might be terrible. And if he's really bad, they're not going to have a first-round pick next year in a year that will have good quarterbacks where they might be picking high and able to get somebody to replace him, because he also will be a little bit older. He was one of the older prospects coming out last year. So this could end up looking really, really bad for the Falcons. I didn't like the move last year, signing Kirk Cousins and then drafting Penix, and then to kind of double down. This is really doubling down on that. You believe in yourself so much. You believe in those moves that you made, one of which has already not worked out with Kirk Cousins. But you believe in those moves so much that you were going to trade that first-round pick next year to go get 2 undersized edge players, one of which, to your point, has character concerns and doesn't play the run. And I mean, if they had just stuck in the second round, there are several edges that would have been.
Yeah, Nick Scorton goes 5 picks after.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I might rather have Nick Scorton. Like I might just rather take him than James Pierce. So I'm sure that's not consensus.
Edge with character concerns, maybe just take Mike Green second round.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was gonna say, I didn't even name Green because clearly a lot, like there were teams that just didn't have him on their board. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. Like if you're, clearly I think he will for sure be a better player. So yeah, that I don't know. That one was bizarre. On the Rams side of the trade, obviously somebody else benefits from this. So the Rams get that future first next year in a year where they might be looking for quarterback next year. And the Falcons now, if they have a bad year, that could be the Rams' ticket to finding a future starting quarterback, along with the fact they take Terrence Ferguson in the second round. It seems like they've been hunting for a tight end now for a couple years. We know they tried to trade up for Brock Bowers last year. Seems like they would have been the floor for Warren or Loveland if either of those guys had fallen down in the first round. They still pick up their tight end in the second round and come away with great value. So huge win for the Rams. I don't know that the Rams did anything that special here. I think they kind of just got handed an offer and they said, we definitely cannot say no to this.
Yeah.
But it's a big win for them.
Yeah. I love the move by the Rams. I don't think it matters who you wanted at that pick at 26. As soon as the Falcons called you and said, we are willing to give you everything for your pick, I mean, I'm pretty confident the Falcons won't be in the playoffs next year. They might not be awful. They might be picking around the middle of the draft again. But then still that gives the Rams 2 picks to go up and get a quarterback if they want one, if they need to replace Stafford.
So here's my other question about this. The pick before this is Jackson Dart. The Giants trade up.
Yeah.
The Giants give the Texans the 34th pick, the number 99 pick, and a third round selection. So basically 2/3, one this year, one next year. And to move up to the 34th pick. Were the Falcons not calling at this point? Like, why would the Texans have not been able to take that price to move up to 25? I don't know. It seems very weird that the Texans would prefer this package from the Giants over what the Falcons were offering. So that also was confusing to me to see. In my opinion, the Giants paid less of a price to the Texans to move to 25 than the Falcons paid to move to 26, and they're not taking a quarterback. Like, typically when you see teams overpay, it's to go get their quarterback. Yeah. The Giants don't overpay. They actually pay like a fairly reasonable price. And then on the other side, you see the Falcons just give up a lot to move up in the draft. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Maybe the 2/3 really aren't that different from a first, but to me that's a pretty distinct like value difference there.
I mean, price-wise, they might not be, but I know that when you're trying to move around, especially when you're considering next year's draft and one that, this year's draft was seen as kind of a weaker class, had some depth to it, but didn't have that star talent early on. So first-round picks next year in a class that does seem to maybe have some more star potential players right now, I think that's more valuable. I would rather have that. And I guess the Falcons must not have been calling, because I think that it's kind of unquestioned that these teams would have just taken the Falcons offer.
Maybe the Falcons just weren't concerned about him going before that point, so they felt like that was the time to move up. But yeah, I mean, the Texans go back to 34. The only way I would understand it for the Texans is if they say like, we have to come away with a lineman here early, so we're going to move back, but we're only willing to move back to 34 because there are a couple offensive linemen that we have to grab. They took a wide receiver. Like it was still more of just kind of a best player available selection for them. So yeah, I feel like they could have picked up some additional capital. They're not in the same position as the Rams where they need that extra first for a quarterback. I just think maybe they could have potentially got more assets out of that. Okay, while we're on this, let's talk about Dart, because I don't think we're gonna hit that later, and we've kind of talked about it in the trade. My opinions are clear on Dart. We don't have to relitigate that discussion. Yeah. I don't think he's going to be good, but I will say I think the Giants paid a reasonable price here. Even just when you compare it to the Falcons, like the Giants, I think did a pretty good job of restraining themselves here and not getting over aggressive for a guy that they didn't need to get over aggressive for. This was not a situation where multiple teams were trying to come up and do this. Like the Giants had identified that he was their guy. They wanted to make sure they got him, but they were able to pay what I think is a pretty fair price for moving up. And, for a team that needed a future quarterback, like obviously I completely disagree on the eval. There's a bunch of other guys I would have rather seen them take here, but at least the process of moving up, I think they handled that part well.
Yeah, I thought that, if you have a quarterback that you like, only giving up 2 third-round picks, essentially only giving up 2 third-round picks to go get him is a price that any team in the NFL would pay. If you have a first-round grade on him, which surely they did because they moved back into the first round for him, then yeah, that's a perfectly fine price to pay. I liked Dart. I don't think I would have taken him in the first round, but I do understand, even if they had like a second-round grade on him, going back at the end of the first round to go get him. You have I think the fit is interesting because you have some other guys with experience there in New York who can play right away. And I think that it does give the Giants a little bit of like job security, because late in the season you could throw Jackson Dart out there, even if the season's not going well. And if Dart shows anything, you could maybe buy yourself another year in that job. I
think I just lost John for a second. We'll get into more of the details on the trade. I know, John, we just lost you for a second. We'll get into more of the yeah, no worries. Good. We'll get into more of the details on the quarterback like landing spot of it in the next show. But the last thing I would call out from the Giants' perspective, like you said, is like, to me, my takeaway from this, as someone obviously who is a Jackson Dart hater is they bought themselves a year, maybe 2 years, and they destined the fact that they will now get fired at some point. That would be the way I would phrase this. Is like you extended your time there, but now all of your eggs are in the Jackson Dart basket. Like if this doesn't work, you're done. So this is it. This is who you've hitched your wagon to. If they're right, obviously, like they've bought themselves some time and now they have a chance to develop a guy. So we'll see what ends up happening, but this is definitely it for the Giants. Like this is who they need, and that's why I don't know. If they have a terrible year, they probably get fired, so I kind of get it, but if they could have bought themselves another year and found their way into a quarterback next year, that might have been like the long-term outcome that would be better for everybody.
Yeah, I think that Joe Shane did a pretty good job in this draft. I think that if Dart doesn't hit, then they're probably fired anyway. So,
Yeah.
but, um, well, I guess I can talk about mine. I think that was by far and away the obvious answer for best and worst. So my answer is more on the best side. I don't particularly hate it, but I think that you could critique it a little bit. But I thought that the Browns trading down was a good move for them. Um, so, they were at 2. Travis Hunter is there, and the Jaguars come up and they give up a first round pick next year to go get Travis Hunter. And similarly, like that first round pick might be pretty high next year.
Yeah.
The Jaguars might be bad again. There's a pretty good chance of that happening. So if that pick is really high, I think this trade grades out even better for the Browns. But even if you just look at this year, because they also swapped some picks this year. So the Browns traded down to 5. They got Mason Graham, who probably a good player, will really help them on the defensive line. Second round, they get Quinshon Judkins, who people, we're talking about as he might go first round. He probably will start for them at running back. Given the state of their depth chart and Nick Chubb being hurt and a free agent right now. They also got Dylan Sampson in the 4th round, which felt like kind of a weird pick. We can talk about the.
We'll get to the late round stuff later.
But the Jaguars, they came up to get Travis Hunter. They get Bashaw Tutin in the 4th round, and then a safety in the 6th round, and give up a first round pick next year. I think just if you're looking at it from what the Browns got this year and what could be for them next year, I think that was worth giving up Travis Hunter for a team that probably is not going to compete this year. And we can talk about that some more in a minute too.
Yeah, I obviously I was as high on Travis Hunter as anybody coming into this draft. And so if I was in the Browns position here, I would have hated it, but I would have had to accept the trade. Yeah. I think this is a no-brainer. When you don't have the quarterback position figured out, everything has to be focused around that, which we'll get to the quarterback position for the Browns here in a little bit. But there's a decent chance that even next year they're still going to be looking for a quarterback. And especially when they made this move, I think they expected to be looking for a quarterback next year. Yeah. So from that perspective, picking up an extra first round pick, like you said, from a team who I'm not confident will be good next year, they might be, we'll see. I think is a no brainer. This you still stuck in the top 10. I'm very curious to know if they had any offers from anybody else. Like if I'm thinking about what the Browns could have done to have this be even more perfect, if somebody was trying to trade up for Genty ahead of the Raiders, I would have loved to see them move back again and just keep accumulating draft capital. But yeah, for Cleveland, I think you have to do this. From the Jags side of this, I mean, you just got to be right. You better be right about what you feel about Hunter. And I feel the same way about Hunter that I think the Jags do. I may not speak as impassioned about it as Gladstone did, their GM. If you haven't seen the video of him introducing Hunter at the press conference, it is so funny. But man, they are all in on this, and he's a guy that I would want to invest in and see if it can work out. But they paid the price of a player whose value is 1.5 times a normal like blue chip guy. And so if Travis Hunter is just ends up being a like very good receiver and never really plays corner, this trade was probably a miss. So it's got to work out for Cleveland or for Jacksonville. I can't hate it too much because, like I said, I thought Hunter was the best player in the draft. I would have tried to take him and play him both ways, especially later in his career. But I think the more I follow the draft, the more you realize that we know nothing. Like we never know who's going to be good, and so the more certainty you have about a guy, and the more you invest in one player, odds are it's just most of the time it's not going to work out how you expect.
And we could be completely wrong about this one too. You know, the Browns have done this before with the Falcons coming up for Julio Jones, and the Falcons won that trade big time.
Yeah,
because Julio was amazing, and the Browns got nothing out of the first round picks that they traded for. So if the Browns don't turn these picks into something, then this trade was not worth it. Especially if Travis Hunter is any good at all, and you don't get anything out of it. I think looking at it from this side, I would have done this if I were the Browns. I would not have done this if I were the Jaguars because it's just really risky to trade up for a player when you are not sure if you're going to really be competitive next year.
Yeah. I am. If I was a Jags fan, I would be happy. But if I was the Jags GM, I would not have done this move. I think that sums up how I feel about it. Okay. Next award is going to be talking about like teams, and a lot of times the draft I think informs us of how teams view themselves or what they see their future looking like. So I'll let you start for this one because we kind of just talked about this trade. What is your team that you think made their vision more clear now coming out of the draft?
Yeah, I chose the Browns on this one. Continuing that conversation, the Browns could have stuck it to, could have picked Travis Hunter and put the veteran quarterbacks that they have out there, and you know they could have tried to win this year a little bit. They told us when they did this and with some of the other moves that they made that they do not think they are competing this year. They stockpiled that additional first round pick. I think sending a message that they are going to be looking for a quarterback next year, most likely. But at the same time, they still took a couple of shots, a couple of dart throws at quarterback. Dylan Gabriel in the third round, a little bit rich for me. I liked him, but I still didn't see him as much more than like
very rich. Yeah,
a backup. I wouldn't have wanted to take a backup quarterback in the third round. Shadur Sanders in the fifth round. You know, apparently most teams had like a second round grade on him. He fell because of the off the field stuff with Dion, and
let's stop there. I think because I do think we have to address the Shedeur thing. Like we're doing a draft recap episode, we probably have to talk about that. To me, I think you separate this into two buckets. He didn't go in the first round because he's not that good.
Yes,
and you don't go in the first round. It will not prevent you from going in the first round if you are a first round talent and you're hard to deal with. If you're a guy that's worthy of being a top 5 pick and people don't like you, you will go in the first round. Once you get outside of that, especially for quarterback, that means you're a backup. And when you're a backup, all of the other stuff now matters way more, especially for a guy who will be the most famous quarterback on the team he gets drafted to. There's a reason Tim Tebow, a lot of teams did not want to sign him. Even Colin Kaepernick, I think, had similar things happen with him. Cam Newton even talked about how he felt like this happened at the end of his career. This is something we see. And as soon as he didn't get picked in the second round, I was like, I don't know where the floor is. Because at this point, it's no longer about the value as a football player. It's the other things. And if there's enough teams that just don't have you on their board, and that's also Sanders' fault because he clearly tried to engineer his landing spot and just did not even, did not take meetings with some teams, blew off other meetings with teams, all that. Then all of a sudden, if you start slipping, there's a bunch of teams that haven't done their homework on you, that have not gotten to sit down and speak with you. Of course, they're not going to take you. They don't know anything about you. So you have the two different pieces. You have the early round where he just wasn't that good. You have the later rounds where he was going to be a pain, and then that's where he falls. And there just weren't that many teams, I think, that even were considering taking him.
Yeah, and I think he did this to himself. I think Dion contributed a lot. I There were a lot of bad takes on both sides. People really happy that he fell. I don't think you I don't think it's wrong to be like happy about it, if you're a big hater, but I don't think you have to be excited that like the biggest fall ever in draft history is happening. Um, Also people saying like, "Oh, this is disrespectful. He's a better player than that." Yeah, he is. But he has made it really obvious through this whole process that he thinks he's even better than these NFL teams do. And he had a terrible pre-draft process. He should have gotten an agent. Um, I think an agent would have told him, "Hey, you're not going to be a top 5 pick. People don't view you that way because the agents talk to the teams. They know generally what the teams think of these players." It would have allowed him to do more of the pre-draft stuff. He could have worked out at the combine more than just being there and meeting with teams. He could have had better preparation to meet with teams. He wouldn't have gone in unprepared for his meeting with the Giants that apparently went terrible and threw his only chance at being picked first round. If he had aced that interview, he probably would have been in the conversation when they traded up to pick Jackson Dart, because Jackson Dart apparently did ace the interview in the meeting with the Giants.
And
So
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I just think that the discourse on this was terrible. You obviously had Mel Kiper on ESPN ranting for 2 days straight, for 2.5 days straight, that he couldn't believe that Shedeur Sanders, one of his top players on his board, was still available in the 5th round. Well, Mel, it really wasn't that hard to believe because of all of the other stuff, all of the off-field stuff that we don't know. We don't know that kind of stuff. I mean, same thing happened with like Mike Green fell all the way to the end of the 2nd round for similar off-field concerns that had him off team's board. I shouldn't say similar off-field concerns.
Yeah.
Very different off-field
Much more
concerns.
serious off-field concerns. Yeah.
Yes. But to your point, when you're talking a backup quarterback, it's not worth the heat that he would bring in the building in those middle rounds. So they went a lot of different directions. Every team in those middle rounds passed on him. And then finally, the 5th round came around, and the Browns, whether it was ownership, front office, whoever, said, "This value's too much. He is a good player. He probably would have been a 2nd round pick if he'd done all the things he should have been doing." So, of course, he still did get drafted. I did think for a minute he might not get drafted, but
yeah. No, I thought there was a chance, which would have been
yeah, it would have been wild.
I can't imagine if that had happened, but yeah, like I think one of the biggest errors they made was just I think they were convinced that people viewed him as a 1st round prospect.
Yeah.
And that was it. It didn't really matter how the other stuff went. We can engineer his landing spot because enough teams are going to be interested where we can manipulate that. And I honestly think the media is to blame for that in some ways.
Yeah.
There were more people that kind of came out as this was happening and said, "Hey, a lot of people are friends with Dion in the media. Like Dion worked at NFL Network, ESPN. Like he's got all those relationships with people, and people really like him. Like as much as I think people find Shedeur unlikable, people love Dion in the media, and I don't think people wanted to be the person to come out and say, no, he's not going to go 1st round. If you listen to some of the people as the draft was getting closer, like Todd McShay said, I don't have a spot for him in the 1st round. Like maybe he goes in the 1st round. I don't know which team it is. Peter Schrager kind of said the same thing. Like I guess I'll throw him to the Saints, but like, I don't really feel good about this. Like I don't know where he's going. And I think that sentiment was how the Sanders camp felt as well. And when you miss the calculation on that, then all the other stuff you thought didn't matter actually becomes the most important thing now that is going to decide where you get drafted. So yeah, complete miscalculation on their part. Definitely should have had an agent because the agent figures this stuff out much earlier and can at least allow you to play some damage control here and find a landing spot for you. But I just think that I don't think it's that hard to explain why he fell.
It's not. It's not at all. And it was really there. It wasn't just ESPN. I kind of flipped between ESPN and NFL Network. Both stations were talking about Shadur the entire time until he got drafted. And I saw this online some. There were a lot of players who got picked who did not get their time on TV, their time in the spotlight when they've worked really hard. They've earned this because ESPN and NFL Network were talking about Shadur Sanders not being drafted. And I think that was way more disrespectful to those players than Shadur not getting drafted until the fifth round.
Yeah.
So I think ESPN and NFL Network missed the mark on the coverage big time during the draft, and it was really frustrating to watch.
Yeah, it's hard because I think there were definitely a ton of people that were turning on the TV on Saturday saying the only reason I am watching this right now is because Shedeur Sanders has not been selected. And
people hoping he was picked, people hate watching.
Yes, whatever it is. But I haven't seen the ratings. I guarantee the Saturday ratings are way better than they normally are. So it's hard because that's why people are tuning in. And I think especially by like the afternoon on Saturday, it was kind of like, how long can Mel Kiper keep this up? Like, is he just never, he's just never going to back down. But I think one of the hardest things was for Kiper, Joel Klatt, who's a Colorado graduate on the other broadcast, for those guys to understand why this was happening, they had to come to grips with the fact that no one else saw Shedeur as the type of player that they did.
Yeah.
And I don't they could be right. Like, I am not saying that everyone else is right on the eval. They may be 100% right. But I think that was part of it, was that they felt much more strongly about Shedeur as a player than almost anyone in the NFL did. And so then that starts to happen. Well, okay, of course, he doesn't go first round, so we'll discuss that. But now everything past that had nothing to do with football anymore. So I think that was where it was hard. It's like almost two separate conversations, and they're not, you can't really.
They were talking about one of them the whole time. Yeah.
And you can't really pair them together. But I thought it was very interesting. Like, as soon as the fall really got bad, so many reports came out about, like, he completely blew off this team in an interview, all this stuff. And it was like, okay, like, this is, we clearly can see what happened.
To Brian Daboll and, like,
yeah. So we'll see. We can talk more about, like, his landing spot. Now, the last thing I'll talk about with the Browns piece of this is my theory on ownership here. So the Browns in the second round take a running back. They take Quinshon Judkins. Makes sense. People thought he was going to go early second round.
Yeah.
Then third round, they take Dylan Gabriel, which was like, I was shocked when that happened. I still can't believe he went third round. I now wonder if they liked Gabriel, they wanted to target him, and then the Shedeur stuff was happening, and their owner was starting to knock on the door saying, hey, like, what about this
Shedeur, that guy?
What about this Shedeur pick that's falling? And they said, let's go ahead and just take Gabriel. We're probably going to take him in the fourth round, fifth round, whatever. Let's just take him now so that we can just put it into the Shedeur stuff and have the guy that we want. So they take Gabriel. Then, by the way, Jimmy Haslam's a Tennessee guy. They come back around and take another running back. They take Dylan Sampson in the fourth round. Yeah. Who knows if that, whatever. Nick Chubb's probably not coming back. They can maybe use another running back, but Jerome Ford's already there. Quinshon Judkins you've already taken. So the Sampson pick is kind of weird, even though I do think Sampson's a good player and was worthy of being a fourth round pick. So you have that as well. Then they come back, and this is where I definitely think the owner got involved. If you watch the clip of the room with, like, the GM and the coach reacting to the pick, it looks like a hostage video. Like, I
don't think they clapped.
No, there's no way they made that pick. And I'm obviously speculating. Like, we will not know. I don't think the GM made this pick. I don't think the coach made this pick. I think Haslam came in, who has a prior relationship with Dion, and said, this is what we're doing. We're taking Shedeur. He's fallen too far. We can make this work. And honestly, he might not be wrong. If I was in the Browns' position, I wouldn't have taken Gabriel in the third round to start. But if I was in the Browns' position, I probably would have taken Shedeur Sanders in the fifth round. So I think it's a very defensible move. But I
Well,
definitely think there were some things happening behind the scenes that led to the sequence of selections that we saw that were outside of a typical GM and coach making the selections.
and as soon as you saw the Browns trade into pick 144, in the fifth round, everybody kind of knew it was going to be
Yeah.
Shadur. Um, the Eagles were apparently interested in him at 145, so I think this was an intentional move by the Browns to go get Shadur. They traded up to the spot for him. I would have liked to see him in Philly a lot more than in Cleveland because of the quarterback room being really crowded there. I'll talk about that really quick just because it kind of fits into them making their vision clearer. They clearly indicated they do not think they're going to be competitive this year, or else they would have pushed the chips in. Um, I think that they could have done more to kind of like kick it out and like sell off some other pieces for some more draft picks. Really go for it in a rebuild mode. But this is not a terrible roster. It just needs a decent amount of work. So I think that they kind of pushed out some assets to next year. They took some chances, and that included taking chances at quarterback, picking Dylan Gabriel third round, and then whether or not it was the GM, whether or not it was like front office or owner enforced, come around and picking Shadir in the fifth round. So they have five quarterbacks on roster. Deshaun Watson will be on IR. He like re-injured his Achilles in the rehab process, and they have no interest in playing him. They're holding on to him
Yeah.
basically until it's
No interest in
possible.
paying him either. Yeah.
Yes, they are holding on to him as long as they have to, and will get rid of that contract as soon as possible. Um, but they still have Flacco, Kenny Pickett, who they traded for, and then the two rookies. And Flacco might be their best option for winning this year. And he might not. He might get cut. He might not be on this
Yeah.
roster. So I think that they made it clear that like we're just going to put something on the field this year, and we are going to reevaluate where we're at and go for it next year.
Yeah, I told you the other night, I think you could order their depth chart for quarterback 1 through 4 in any order, and I would
Yeah,
not be surprised no matter what you come
yeah.
up with.
Shadur might be starting. He might be cut in training
Yeah.
camp. We don't
Yeah.
know.
No idea. It's crazy. I do think they definitely have more of a possibility now of having their quarterback on their roster for future years than I expected after the first round. But I
Yeah,
think this team is still thinking about this as a long term thing. Maybe one of these guys works out. Odds are we might be taking somebody else next year.
yeah,
Like you said, I think Shador and the Eagles would have been really fun. That's probably one of the only locker rooms where he still may not be like the main
yeah,
part thing of attention, and I think they have enough big personalities there where that might have worked. And the Eagles have proven that they have been able to manage those type of situations very well in the past. So would have been interesting. I definitely would have liked to see that. But I think Cleveland is a good spot for him too. He'll have a chance to play early, which
yeah,
when you talk about fifth round picks, like how many fifth round picks have a real chance to play early? Like almost none. So
yeah.
that's
Especially
still
at quarterback. Like, I mean, fifth round picks at quarterback are they're developmental. They're third guys,
yeah.
and he might be the starter at some
Yeah.
point this year. So,
Which we'll get to another team later that's somehow in the same division that
yeah,
also might be
Might be
playing
in
a
the-
fifth round pick or later, but they're like, yeah, it does not happen. Okay, I'll move on to mine. There was a lot to cover in that part of the conversation. I'll be quick with mine. Like I think there's kind of two teams. I actually just kind of added one to my list that I think made their vision clear. The first one I'd say like I just like what they did is Arizona. They take Walter Nolan at 16, and then they come back and grab Will Johnson in the second round, who fell because of knee issues. Another guy that I think his fall can easily be explained. I don't think this is something that's like hard to understand. It just is what it is. Like he had medicals that most people weren't aware of until he started falling on draft night. So what I like about this is the Cardinals have a bunch of okay players, and they took swings to try to acquire elite players. Nolan is a super explosive guy that has questions about the motor and the technique, but if it works, he's going to be very good. Same with Will Johnson, right? This was a guy some people thought was the most talented corner in this draft, including Travis Hunter. So I like what they did. I think their vision now is clear in terms of we have some guys where if this works, we actually have some blue chip talent to go alongside a lot of the other solid picks on our roster. The other one I'll add quickly is the Seahawks. I think the Milroe pick in the third round now shows me that they view the Sam Darnold contract and moving off of Geno as more of just something where they want to get younger. They kind of want to reset. Darnold is a guy that allows them to still remain competitive while they're doing that, but they don't view him as a super, super long-term commitment, which I think is the correct way to view Darnold. I would have preferred them keep Geno, but this at least lets me know, like, I think they're viewing where their team is at, like, in terms of ability to contend in a accurate way. And so I had Noto as a 4th-round grade. They take him, mid to late 3rd, whatever. I think that makes sense. And it's a guy that you have a chance to develop later on. So 2 NFC West teams there that I think did a good job of identifying where they were at and putting themselves on a path to success in the future.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. Arizona, if you look at their recap, I mean, almost all the players they picked are from big programs. They're big guys from big programs. And, that can be really helpful. I think that maybe is going in the direction of like the Eagles just drafting Alabama and Georgia players, and it has worked out pretty well for the Eagles so far. And then the Seahawks, you mentioned Jalen Milroe. I think the tough part for him is he got picked with the pick that they got in the Geno Smith trade. So really, they traded Geno Smith for Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
We will see how that works out for them long term. But as far as I think it does tell you exactly what they think about their team, that they can still remain competitive, which I agree with. They have some good players in Seattle and are taking a shot on a really high upside quarterback that could be an answer for a long time if he works out. So I liked the Seahawks draft too. I really liked a lot of drafts this year.
Yep. All right, let's go to the other side now, teams that made their vision more confusing. I will, again, not spend much time on mine. My team was the Bucs. So we already kind of talked about this in the Emeka Ibuka most surprising pick. I think everything we said there basically applies to this discussion. So I will go and throw it over to you for another team that you think did the same thing.
Yeah, so the Texans, they coming into the offseason, they knew that their offensive line was really bad. They traded or cut 3 starters on that offensive line that was really bad. And they brought in a few guys in the agency, but all on 1-year deals. Everybody was kind of expecting them to throw a lot of assets at the offensive line position. And I thought that they were going to go offensive line first round if they could, and potentially double up. Instead, they took in the top 3 rounds 2 receivers from the same school,
Yeah.
and in the entire draft took 1 offensive lineman who I like, Ariante Ursary, in the 2nd round. But it was just a really odd.
Yeah. Never
draft.
expected that to be the outcome for them.
No, I thought that, even if you're only going to take 1 early rounds because you like the guys you signed in free agency, all to 1-year deals, they if you want them there next year, you have to re-sign them. I thought they would take a few swings in the late rounds.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And I just thought that they were telling us that
they had to go get Graham Mertz instead.
And that was another one, like, that is that a wasted pick? I mean, we don't know exactly what he's going to be, but I feel like that's a wasted pick.
Yeah, you used a 6th-round pick on a coach, basically, is my opinion on that. But yeah, I agree. This is one that, like, I just have a hard time understanding without future moves to shore up the O-line. Because like you said, the 1-year deal thing, that makes it even more confusing. Like, even if you felt good about your line this year, I just would have thought, okay, you need to stack depth to continue to bring those players in.
Great players.
No.
They were like average at best.
Yeah, and they stunk
okay
last year. They were horrible.
Awful.
So, like, this is not just like, oh, you throw a couple guys in, it should be okay. No, like, you should have like multiple contingency plans in place.
Yes.
At this point, yeah, I was very surprised as well. It's funny, I actually like the Jalen Noel pick. Like, he fell a lot. Like, I like that pick, but did you need Higgins too? I don't know. I definitely think there was some opportunity there. All right, well, let's go through some of our like specific picks now that we wanted to talk about. We can probably run through these a little bit faster. So we're gonna do best early pick, worst early pick, best late pick, worst late pick. let's actually go through the best ones first, because I think my like worst ones kind of line up together
Okay.
in a conversation. But we'll go through best early pick. I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, I went Abdul Carter at third overall, taking a premier pass rusher who has tons of upside, really athletic guy. The Giants, I really liked what they did, and apparently they did try to trade up for Cam Ward. I think that they would have preferred that still to
Yeah.
getting Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart. But I think sitting at three and taking what is probably the last blue chip stud player in this class was it was a no brainer, and I'm glad that they didn't overthink it.
Yeah. Yeah. Not much to add there with Carter. I think that was a no brainer. I thought about putting him on my list and was just like, yeah, this was like a the Giants did exactly what they needed to. So yeah,
Yeah,
kept it simple for them. My best early pick was Tedero McMillan at 8 to the Panthers. I tried to find one that wasn't like consensus. Everyone feels good about this here. I think the everyone had them going defense, and I can see why. Like their defense was not good at all, but I do think this team like really needs to support Bryce Young if he's going to have success. And I like McMillan. I think he's going to be a good player. I think we talked about that in the mock draft episode as well. So I like them being aggressive here and getting a receiver that can win downfield and at the catch point for Bryce Young. I think McMillan's good after the catch as well. So I think this pick made sense for them, and it was somewhere where I don't think he had been mocked to the Panthers very much, but when you saw it, it's like, oh, like this makes perfect
makes a
sense.
ton of sense. Yeah, I like this one a lot. I think that they needed the number one receiver. He's probably going to step in and be that immediately. Um, and he's shown he can work with short quarterbacks. So, yeah, I think Tet is perfect in Carolina. And they still hammered all the defensive positions that they were really needing later in the draft. And I think they got some real potential good players at those spots. So I thought they had a good draft.
All right, who was your best late pick? And spoiler alert, I actually had this and then changed it, so I'm glad that you included it here.
Okay, well, I would have said yours. So, um, well, I put this to be different because I'm talking about multiple different ones, but I put Josh Connerly Jr. Some people think that this was like a head scratcher because they have tackles in Washington, but I thought Connerly was a really good player. He probably could have gone earlier. Washington just sat in place in the first couple rounds and just picked good players that fell to them. Um, so yeah, I thought Connerly is a really good player. Not necessarily an immediate need for Washington, but they can still find these high upside long term solutions at valuable positions like tackle. He could probably also kick in and play guard if you really needed to. So, Connerly I thought was a great pick.
Yeah, we had another award later on as like a team that drafted best player available, and Connerly was my pick for that. You had Malachi Starks for that, which we also
Yeah,
already
so
covered. So I think those fit
yeah.
fit well. And that's kind of the way I want to frame this Connerly pick is they could have said we have to take an edge here. We have to improve on the defensive line. I am very glad that they did not do that because Jaden Daniels is still only in his second year. This team should not be throwing everything at a need just to try to fix something in spite of taking very good players. And I think Connerly will be a good tackle for them. Even though they traded for Laramie Tunzel, who knows how long-term of an answer that is for them. So I really like the Connerly pick. Obviously, like there's some people that are very high on him. I'm not breaking down offensive line tape, obviously, but I do think that I always like to see teams where I think their process is sound, and I think the Commanders did a good job on that pick. All right. Mine, which is funny that you said you were going to include this, so I guess we were on the same page here for these two, is Jahad Campbell. I think, to me, the reason I like this the most for the Eagles is that Zach Bond is basically the same type of player where you have the potential to line him up at edge, but he's actually been, Bond had a ton of success and was an all-pro this year at middle linebacker. Campbell has similar versatility, so I just like that the Eagles have a blueprint here for, like, this is how we use this guy. I think if there's no medical problems with him, he goes higher. So I think you can explain why he fell to the Eagles. I don't think this is like some stunning, oh, how on earth did he get down to the end of the first round thing? But he's a very good player. I think he will be one of the best players coming out of this draft, and the Eagles continue to just stockpile the SEC talent that allows their defense. I also like to see them take another linebacker because 2 years ago that was where they were so bad up the middle of the field defensively, so bad. Last year, they hit on Zach Bond, that allows them to have a lot of success. You're not always going to sign the best middle linebacker in the NFL to a $1.5 million contract. So
Yeah.
investing some real resources into it, I think makes sense. So I like this for the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Jihad Campbell. Obviously, I am biased. I'm wearing the Alabama hoodie. He was one of my favorite players on the team last year because he played hard pretty much every single game, with maybe the exception of the Vanderbilt game where nobody on the defense played good.
Yeah.
Um, but he was consistently one of the hardest workers, one of the best players on the field. He showed he could do a lot of different things. You could move him around. You could drop him back in coverage. You could rush him off the edge, bring him on blitzes. I think this is a player that the Eagles are going to have a lot of fun with in their defensive scheme. And, he might turn into Zach Bond, which, he was a great player for them last year. And I think in the immediate future, even if you feel like he's not going to get on the field as like an every down player for you, he can come in as a situational passer.
Yeah. And we lost John there for a second, but John was highlighting there the idea of, Campbell has the versatility to come in as a pass rusher.
Yeah.
I'm basically just restating what you were saying because I lost
Yeah.
you. Yeah, a lot of flexibility there with Campbell to deploy him in different
Loved-
ways. And I think for the
Campbell
Eagles,
pick.
that is very helpful for the way they play. All right, let's go into the worst picks. And I'm going to pair mine together because they're very similar. Like
Yeah.
I didn't reinvent the wheel here. I don't really love either first round running back pick. There are places where I would not have said this. So this is not just like first round running back bad. Like that's not the point here. The point is first round running backs make sense in certain contexts. Genty and Hampton, I think, are talented enough guys where I'm not gonna kill you for taking a first round running back. But what I will say is when you have other clear needs, I'm not a big fan of it. I think this should be a luxury pick, not a foundational pick. I don't think the Raiders have enough talent on their roster, especially like at offensive line. Like Mimbu is sitting right there at 6. Like I would have loved that for them. There's a ton of guys on defense they could have used, although it may have been a little early for some of the edge guys. I just would have preferred seeing them, take the simple pick. Same thing with the Chargers. Like you just paid Najee Harris to come over there. You still have multiple other running backs that could be depth pieces on your roster. And now you take Hampton, who I really like. Like there are teams that could have taken Hampton late in the first round, where I would have said, yeah, like I think this makes sense. Pittsburgh, maybe even Denver, who kind of has a weird running back room right now, like would not have surprised me at all. I think what the Chargers have done so far has been we're going to build through the trenches. We're going to spend resources where it makes sense at skill positions to fill those rooms out. I think they could have continued down that path and got more value out of the selection than they did. We'll see. I think both these guys are going to be really good players, so it's not going to be an obvious thing that they miss on these picks. I don't think. I don't think these are two teams that are ready to take a running back.
I feel the same way about both of these picks. I think that I like the Genty pick a little bit. It's not my least favorite pick. But you do have the huge concern of like the Raiders are just not a very good team. I think they'll be better this year because of some of the moves they made, and especially bringing in Geno Smith, and Pete Carroll's a good coach. But I don't think they're a team that's ready for Genty, and I think it'll be kind of like the Falcons picking Bijan Robinson a couple of years ago, even though he was a better running back prospect than Genty. Genty's a great running back prospect, but Bijan was like a generational running back prospect. So, I just think it's an interesting front on the value front. Interesting pick on the value front. Omari and Hampton, I really don't like for the Chargers because I think they have a lot of like foundational needs to their team still, despite having success last year. and the Najee contract, like you mentioned. And I think that they're a team that's going to have success running the ball with whatever running back they throw in there. So I don't really get why you're taking a first round running back.
Yeah. And they have points on their roster where they're really, really good, and then others where they're terrible. And that's the type of team where it's like, yeah, like you could really use some first round talent in certain positions. So yeah, I'll let you go to your worst early pick and worst late pick. And I'll add one last thing here. I didn't think there were a ton of bad picks early. I think the one you're calling out here is a good one to call out, but that's the other reason why I kind of defaulted to Genty is like, there's not really any of the other ones that I think are huge mistakes.
Yeah. And, well, this one is borderline early. We talked about him earlier, but I had Tyler Booker for my worst early pick. I think it was just a reach. You probably most likely could have gotten him second round. I would have rather them take some of the pass rushers if you really wanted pass rush, which they do come back and get Ezraku second round. Thought that was a good value. And then get Siobhan Revel in the third round, also great value. But again, reaching on Booker here, like you could have had both those players and potentially a player that more people liked in the consensus. If you really wanted Booker, you could have gotten him second round, most likely.
If they had traded back to like 23 and taken Booker and then finished out with Ezraku and Revel, I would have said like this is maybe my favorite draft. Like
I would have understood that a lot.
Yeah, because I really like their late round picks, but yeah, the Booker one is a little questionable. All right, what is your worst pick in the later part of the first round?
Yeah, I said Tyleik Williams for the Lions. This was also a spot where like I ended up liking a lot of the late first round picks, and even though I thought Jackson Dart was overvalued, James Pierce I didn't like the trade. Like both of those guys, the Giants at least, I don't mind what they gave up to go get a quarterback. James Pierce, I don't like the trade, but like I can understand them trading up for a pass rusher. But like Tyleik Williams was one where I was like, they picked a nose tackle in the first round. And this felt like the Cowboys picking Mozzie Smith a couple of years ago, where it's like they feel like they have this need, they like this player, so they pick him. But what upside does it bring you? I don't think Tyleik Williams is a player that has like pass rush upside. I think he's a run stuffer. And at this point, I will also include the disclaimer that I'm probably going to be wrong about this because Brad Holmes and the Lions have proven they know what they're doing.
No, I'm putting Brad Holmes on fraud watch. That's what I'm going to say. This
was not a good draft for them.
This was a heat check, is what it was. I feel so good about myself. I'm not listening to anybody else. I'm just going to take the players I like. And you know who that has worked for? Almost no one.
Yeah.
I still don't. I think the Gibbs draft,
Jack Campbell,
trading up. Brian Branch,
and
one other player who I'm forgetting now, who they also took in the second round. I think that draft gets more praise than it deserves, to be honest.
They had a lot of pieces in place before that. Yeah. And I think Brad Holmes has done a good job building.
Yes, the early part of the rebuild, they did such a good job. But like you have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. Like, I expect some value to come out of those.
Sam Laporta was the
other one, and that's a great pick. But yeah, the Tesla pick in the 3rd round, who was the highest pick above consensus anyone, and they gave up multiple
3rd round picks for that.
You trade 2 3rd round picks for a guy who most people had like outside of their top 150. That is just like, we don't care. We do what we do. We like who we like, and we'll see. Maybe they'll be right. It is very rare you see teams deviate this far from consensus and look smart by the end of it. So I will be very curious. I'll be very curious to continue to follow this. I do think the run stuffer idea makes sense for what Detroit needed. Definitely.
I just don't like the value.
Yeah, a heavy price to pay.
Because you can find nose tackles that don't offer pass rush upside. Even in free agency, they're not very expensive. And you can also find them a little bit later in the draft.
Yep. All right, let's go to our last one here before we kind of conclude with one final topic. And this is like the player that was drafted for need. Generally, people have opinions on best player available versus need. I trend towards the best player available, but I also recognize that there are times where drafting for need makes sense. And I think these 2 picks that we're going to talk about here are good examples of that. So, John, I'll let you start.
Yeah, mine is probably going to be the same things that you say. I have Will Campbell to the Patriots. I think that they could have picked several different players, but I think that they have such a hole at tackle. They have nobody. Um, they just needed a body in the room to play tackle, and I do think Will Campbell is a good player. I think that the questions about his wingspan are legitimate. Um, so, he might be a guard long term. I actually like the pick. I think that even if he is a guard, he's probably going to be really good and he'll probably be on their roster for a long time. But this was clearly a spot where, like, we need a guy at this position. We do like the player, so we're going to draft him at fourth overall, where there may be other players on their board who were rated a little bit higher.
Yeah, I would have been very curious to see how they had the tackles graded out specifically.
Yeah.
But like you said, I do think Campbell. There may have been other guys like I would not be surprised if like Mason Graham was higher on a lot of teams' boards. Especially we know Genty was. That's just a positional thing.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it makes sense for where the Patriots are. Like Drake May is everything that you should be focused on at this point, and I don't think they liked any of the receivers enough to invest resources on that part of the offense. So it makes complete sense, but yeah, it's just kind of like we'll see how this works out. Like this may not be a home run for New England. Unfortunate that they pick right after the Hunter Carter mix there, but is what it is. So okay, the guy I had for a team that drafted for need is Gray Zabel. We linked him to the Seahawks during our mock draft discussion. Like this is not a big surprise.
Yeah.
They needed interior line help as bad as any team in the NFL, and are a roster that otherwise is not bad, right? Like this is a team where you can make an argument for drafting for need because the rest of the roster is in a decent state. So I like Zabel. It seems like some people think he might have 4 position upside, like maybe he could even play right tackle. So I especially like if you're taking a guy in the first round that maybe that's a possibility. Like there's there's a little bit more upside than you would traditionally think about with just taking a guard in the first round. Maybe he could even play center. So I like this pick for Seattle, and I think they're a team where the player lined up with the need, like it just makes sense for them.
Yeah, this one, I think this was a pretty chalky pick, and I think it makes a lot of sense why they needed help on the interior pretty desperately. Zabel gives them a lot of flexibility to move around wherever they need him to. So if they need to reshuffle in the middle of training camp just based on how things are shaking out, like he could do that really easily. So I think this was a really good pick. Even though they did draft for need, I think this lined up very well for them.
All right, last topic before we wrap up here. We really didn't even have 2 things to throw in this award. This is kind of just like its own.
There's one team for this.
Its own thing, which is basically like, are you going to do anything? Which is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now they take Derek Harmon in the first round, which as a Ravens fan that scares me. I think Harmon could be good, and that D line like that is pretty scary for to throw him on top of that.
Did you heard the story about him and his mom?
Yeah, that was
awful story. His mom was like on her deathbed, and he got drafted and was able to go tell her that he got drafted. Just like I think a couple of hours before she passed. So great story for him. Really glad that he got that. I think that is going to be a really good pick for them. But.
Yeah, it was very cool to see like him have that moment before she passed. The biggest question with the Steelers is who's playing quarterback, and they take Will Howard in the 6th round. We can talk more about his fit with them on the quarterback recap episode. I actually think that's awesome value for where they got him, but he can't start, can he? Like there's no way, which it sounds like Aaron Rodgers is kind of still just deciding whether or not he wants to play football. And I think until that question gets answered, it's kind of up in the air. And maybe Kirk Cousins comes into consideration after that, but I was surprised to see the Steelers not do anything early at quarterback.
Yeah.
I thought Milroe would be a guy they would like. And I actually like Will Howard a lot. I think getting him in the 6th round is a very good pick, but very strange to see them come out of draft weekend with I would just say I don't think their starting quarterback is on their roster.
I think that's right. And I liked Will Howard too. I would have picked him in the late third or early fourth round. They were picking pretty late in the third round, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they'd taken him there. But I think if they were interested in him potentially being their starter, they would have taken him there.
Yes.
And them taking him in the sixth round means we like this guy as a developmental quarterback. We don't think he's ready to start right now, which just means, are you starting Mason Rudolph? Like,
They
what are you
cannot.
doing
They
at quarterback?
cannot.
They're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers. So if
Yeah. And that's
I
like
think
that's the simple answer to this question is like in a week Aaron Rodgers decides he's playing for the Steelers. If that does not happen,
they've misjudged this
what
whole
what
situation.
what do we like is I guess Kirk Cousins at that point is like that probably the answer. But like outside of those two, I have no idea where this goes. So it'll be very interesting to follow, especially if Rodgers decides like I'm done or I'm gonna go play somewhere else.
Yeah, and I don't know if he has anywhere else he could play. So
Yeah.
I think that well, at the I won't say too much about Rodgers, but he probably should have told them before the draft what his decision was. They probably should have given him a deadline, like, hey, we need to know so that we can actually
Yeah.
plan who our starting quarterback is going to be this year. Now that it's almost May,
Which I think from what I heard from reporting, like he told the Giants the same thing, like I need some time, and he said like if you can't wait, that's fine. Like I understand how this works.
Yeah.
And the Giants said like yeah, like we're gonna have to make a decision, and I think he said the same thing to Pittsburgh, and they were like okay, I like we'll wait, which. I don't know. Like maybe they're just very confident he's going to decide he wants to play.
well,
But yeah, we'll see what happens. It'll be very interesting because if he doesn't, yeah, like who knows where this ends up going. Okay, I know we lost John there, but we were wrapping up anyway, so I will wrap up the episode. So that'll do it for this episode. Thanks everybody for following along with all of our draft coverage. We'll probably do one more episode talking about the quarterbacks, and then you probably won't hear from us for a while. But that'll do it, and thanks for listening.